Thank you for having me. I'm actually a little nervous. Thank you. First of all, great thanks for so many of you being on the forefront there and recognizing what B Corp is. One of the things I did do was I was on the board of directors of B Corp and B Labs, and we were actually the 40th. Equilibrium was the 40th B Corp and one of the first in financial services. So let me tell you a little bit of a story, and the topic that I was asked to talk on was what could the Valley get wrong about sustainability? So at 47, and that was a long time ago, so I'm much older than I look. At 47, and the year was 2006, 2007, I had spent almost 30 years in high tech. I got a chance to start in high tech when I was 18 years old, wandering into Selectron when it was a tiny little $4 million company. And they let me do, as an 18, 19-year-old, all the things that you should never do. All right, and now at my age, I look back and I ask myself, what were they thinking? And so I had a great time in the industry. And at 47, I just didn't feel like, I was a general partner at a venture capital firm, and we were managing about $800–900 million, and I just didn't want to hear another mobile app pitch. And I also remembered, and again, being old enough, I grew up in Monte Vista High School area where we were literally just a couple blocks away from the first Apple buildings. And I remember back then that a lot of the high tech was about meaningful social issues and meaningful enablement issues. The 1984 commercial was about empowerment. Old names that you guys don't recognize anymore, like Tandem and even HP, were pioneers in proper employee engagement and community and serving the community. And I sort of wanted to get back to that. And so I, at 47, I left the industry. And most of you probably are a few years away from that, and you probably can't comprehend what I'm about to say, which is that in the last 10 years, since 2007, I've probably talked to 10 people that I grew up in the high-tech industry with. I completely shut the door. As far as most of my venture capital friends are concerned in the Valley, I died. All right? Either that or I went to a small island in the South Pacific. So the challenge I wanted to ask myself was, could financial innovation and finance itself be used to address many of these issues within sustainability? Everyone talks about how these are massive opportunities in both the social and the environmental. And by the way, almost always when we talk about sustainability, we only talk about the environmental. But where there's environmental, there's social. If you talk about the fact that there's no water, inevitably there's a village dominated by women or children that is at stake there. When you talk about food, almost the same thing. So you can't separate social from environmental when you talk about sustainability, and yet almost all the time we do that. So everyone goes, wow, these are huge, massive markets. And I needed a way to get in. And I won't belabor that story. That's for lunchtime, how someone remakes themselves at 47. So what we did was we created a company, an investment firm, that focuses in on sustainability as the underlying driver for value creation. That is, in fact, our competitive advantage. We build portfolios in 3 areas. One is sustainable ag and food, and the second one is in renewable resources, which is specifically waste energy, waste to water, and the intersection of waste, energy, and water. And then the third area is green buildings. I got to be honest with you, this is 10 years. This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. This year I will have to date flown probably 250,000 miles, and I'm constantly in front of investors and or looking for deal flow. So in the first 5 years, it was almost impossible for us to get an appointment with an investor. I mean, we had to beg for it. And then about 5 years ago, the world suddenly turned, and almost all the institutional investors wanted to at least take a meeting. And in the last 2 years, the world just completely opened up. All right, you now have large-scale pension plans that are $300–400 billion in size that 5 years ago said to us, no, we don't do sustainability because we do real investing here. All right? To now, all of a sudden, they're wearing the SDG, Sustainable Development Goal lapel pin. All right? And in fact, in the way that they're evaluating investment managers, they're asking us SDG questions. All that has transformed. And so today, we're managing about $2.5 billion in this area. So what I wanted really to share with you today is really what does it mean for sustainability? And when we got started in this field, we didn't go after the clean tech or we didn't go after the high tech approach. We went after large scale businesses that had built entire business models around sustainability and were absolutely at the top end of their performance. So we went to, and if you've never read any of his work, read some of the books. He died in 2011, but Ray Anderson. And Ray Anderson took a sleepy industry called carpets, this stuff, and in the South, Georgia, and created about $1 billion company that was one of the leaders in sustainable practices. And we went to school on Ray Anderson, and I'll clue you in on one thing. Ray was an unbelievably charismatic, he's sort of a born-again sustainabilityist, all right? He didn't come at this naturally, but he was charismatic as hell. His products were unbelievable. But it's really an important sub-lesson here, and that is Ray would give these great speeches about their biomimicry, carpets, and all this kind of stuff. But if you actually tore apart his speeches, he talked a lot about rerouting heat pipes in his factories. He talked a lot about little things, because what we took away from the main lesson from Ray was that sustainability was in, to use that old phrase, God is in the details. Sustainability was in the nickels in the sidewalk. All right? It's got a lot of sexiness, but that was an incredibly important lesson. We went and interviewed, we had the opportunity to get to really know Ray. We also interviewed some of the family farms and what were they doing to differentiate themselves at the forefront of organic and sustainable. By the way, it's a misnomer to call these family farms. Some of these were $200–300 million operations. And they were at the leading edge of technology, and we asked them, what are you doing to create competitive advantage at scale with your organics and sustainable practices? And from them, we learned that one of the things they teach in business school is is to cut things up, processes into smaller and smaller pieces, into silos. What we learned from these folks was a derivation of what Ray Anderson was telling us, and that is integration at the right level is really important, because sustainability, you can't get closed loop, you can't do that whole circular economy thing if you don't control pieces of it. The input of one is the output of another, the output of one is the input of another. Until you understand and can control big pieces of that process, you can't take advantage of that. We went and got to know Girding Edelin Development. And Girding Edelin Development had done about $4 billion of state-of-the-art LEED Platinum commercial buildings. And we wanted to find out from them what was their secret for building these $100 million state-of-the-art green buildings. Was it just the fact that you were incredibly energy efficient and that you were incredibly water efficient? And one of the things we learned is human beings open windows in the best buildings, and that just screwed up your energy footprint. It's too hot, it's too cold, turn it up, turn it down. So from them we learned that you can design technology beautifully, but humans will screw it up. Okay? And so if you don't incorporate humans into the solution, you can't do it. And that was one of the big lessons we had about it's not about technology. And so when we got ready to start our firm and build our firm on sustainability, these were the 6 main principles that we built into it. You'll not find them anywhere in anyone's definition. We learn these heuristically, and these are then what we build our strategies on. There's only a couple that I want to highlight. Long term, if I tell you that you can only hold a portfolio of forests, you bought a forest, all right? It's 100 square miles of forest land. If I tell you that you can only hold it for 3 years, the only rational, prudent decision you can make is clear cut it. Okay? If I tell you that this forest is an asset that I need to hold on for 100 years, 100 years, then you got to think about things like, oh, well, geez, you know, the soil matters a lot. Gosh, those pine beetles and climate change, all that's eating my profits and my asset value. I got to think about those. What would I do from a proper rotation? Because I do want it to generate income, but I want to do it in a manner that allows me to preserve this asset. If I want to build a building for 100 years, I mean, you go to Cambridge, right? Or Oxford, and geez, you got buildings that are 1,000 years old, right? And so what does it mean to build a building that allows yourself to regenerate the building? So long term is one of the most important parts of sustainability. Resilience, integration, those things I've already talked about. People is probably one of the most important lessons that there's this, a lot of the conservation organizations, especially environmental conservation organizations, have historically had this concept of the noble nature, as if people weren't part of it. Unfortunately, we are part of it, and a lot of the conservation strategies fail because you don't think about the fact that we're here to stay, all right? Or at least for the next 100 years or so. The last one is humility, and it's really rare for an investment firm to make humility one of its core sustainability principles and core values, and that is, you know, about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, they told us that butter was evil. I'm pretty sure that this was not like some evil, vicious conspiracy. It was the best science at the time. And now today, 40 years later, they tell us, hey, butter's not so bad. All right? And remember, when we talk about the word sustainability, and this is where hubris will kill you, we are talking about the most complex natural systems. We're talking about the most complex economic systems. We're talking about the most complex human systems. We're going to screw up. So you do the best thing you can, and you learn quickly, and when you make a mistake, you figure it out, you modify it, you fess up to it, and you move on. And it's a constant learning because you can't get it right. What do you think you have to watch out for when you're from the Valley? All right, so we get to see, one thing I didn't mention is we're real assets investors. We're not venture capital, we're not private equity. So I joke that when you go on our website, you should take it very literalistically. If it's a picture of a cow, we own it. Okay? And my high-tech friends, you mean the sensor on the cow? No, the cow. Okay? The drone, nope, the cow. All right? So it's our perspective is from that perspective, getting talked to by high-tech folks. All right? So a few watch-outs. It's more than technology, block data, and big data, and blockchain does not solve everything. All right? The registry for the cow is the least important thing on my list. Okay? And so more important than that is the application. How does it really work? And so what ends up happening is a lot of folks in the Valley will, especially in agriculture, we're here to help now. They'll go in and talk to a very sophisticated farmer. And remember, many of these farmers are literally operating billion-dollar farm operations. And they go in and they tell them about self-driving this and big data this and all that. And a lot of these folks will tell you, oh, we did that last year, or we did that last decade. All right. Don't you want to know this? No, we don't. All right? And so it's a deep understanding of the application that's actually critically important here. The other thing that's critically important is we're dealing with human behavior and culture. Change takes place really slowly. Oftentimes, and I'll give you another funny example about agriculture, we like to talk about farmers being stuck. They're kind of stuck. Well, if you're a farmer, you spend your entire, since Mesopotamia, all right, you've spent your entire year worrying about things you can't control. Weather, the locusts, rain, too much sun, too little sun, all right? And now you add on it to commodity prices. So by definition, they're risk managers. That's what they do. They're risk managers. And so to understand their life and their behavior pattern as opposed to sort of doing the old high-tech, you don't get it, is to understand the real change factors that are going to take place in many of the aspects of sustainability. Scale. If you're doing it at a acute level, you're not feeding the planet. All right, and this has nothing to do with whether you're distributed, centralized, redundant, et cetera, but we're talking about a lot of milk, a lot of grain, a lot of bread, okay? And we're talking about at that level. This stuff's boring. Most of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, food, water, shelter, clothing, is pretty boring stuff. It's not the kind of stuff that gets talked about in this valley. It's really boring stuff. And more than boring, you have to do it over and over and over again. And more than that, it has to look sort of the same every time. Because the tomato that we grow for you, you want the same tomato next week, next month, next year. All right? And at the end of the day, and this is one of the problems that we see with a lot of the conversations that we have with Silicon Valley companies, at the end of the day, many aspects of sustainability are dealing with things that we know and love: energy, water, food, all right? And at the end of the day, I don't care how much high tech and intel inside you put into a head of lettuce, all right, which is the output of many of these vertical farms and things like that, it's still a head of lettuce. Okay, and there's maybe 6 of you in here that will pay $10 for a head of lettuce. Most of you, after the first 5, which was kind of fun because it was some high-tech lettuce, all right, after the first 5, you're going to want to buy a head of lettuce. That's really good quality, tastes really good, and costs what you think it should cost. No matter how much tech, how much IP, how much genetic engineering, how much no water, no electricity, squirrel pedal power was used to grow that blueberry, it's still a blueberry, all right? And yet at the same time, one of the things that the Valley is doing, it is fundamentally shifting the value chain and the business model, and we have to live with that. So the technology, I'll speak out of both sides of my mouth here, the technology is critically important, but it's critically important and it is making a big difference, but within the context of some of the watch outs and some of the things that we've built into our sustainability principles. Thank you so much.